Lecture 14. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Virtual University's course on Business and Technical Communication. In today's lesson, we will look at revising business messages. In this lecture, you will learn to edit your messages for content and organizational style and readability. You'll also learn to choose the most correct and most effective words to make your point. You'll learn to rewrite the sentences, to clarify the relationships amongst the ideas, and to make your writing interesting. In this lecture, you will also learn to identify the elements of paragraphs, choosing the best design for written documents, how to rewrite paragraphs using the appropriate development techniques, and how to proofread your messages for mechanics and format. First of all, look at how you will edit your message. Once you've written, in previous lectures we talked about planning a message and composing it, and in this lecture, in how to revise your message, the first and foremost thing is the editing of your business message. When you're editing anything, you will look at the content and the organization. You will see what is included in the message and how that the ideas are organized. Now, when you're doing that, you need to stick to the point and make sure that you have expressed the main idea in the first paragraph. This is something that you really need to focus on. जो आपका main idea है वो पहले paragraph में ही आना चाहिए ताकि पढ़ने वालों को पहला paragraph पढ़ते ही अंदाजा हो जाए कि बाकी text के अंदर क्या मौजू क्या होगा. So when revising, make sure that the main idea is in the first paragraph. Also, you need to make sure that the key features of your stance are highlighted in the middle paragraphs. तो जो middle paragraphs हैं उनको ये चीज़ highlight करनी है कि आपका stance क्या है, आप आखिर क्या चीज़ कहना चाह रहे हैं. तो एक और जो important चीज़ है जब आप editing कर रहे हैं तो उसमें आपने ये देखना है कि जो redundancies हैं वो नहीं होनी चाहिए. You will eliminate anything that is redundant, anything that is extra, you will delete that. जो भी चीज़ें आपको अपना मैसेज दूसरी बार पढ़ने पे लगे कि ये चीज़ें फालतू हैं, इनको शायद यहाँ नहीं होना चाहिए या इनके इंक्लूड करने से मैसेज में कोई इफेक्टिवनेस की इफेक्टिवनेस में कोई इजाफा नहीं हो रहा, तो बेहतर है कि उन चीज़ों को मैसेज से निकाल दिया जाए. स्पेशली अगर कोई आपको ऐसी चीज़ें बात लगे कि रेपिटेशन हो रही है तो फिर तब भी उसको निकाल दें. और अगर आपको लगे कि कोई चीज़ मैंने फालतू लिख दी है और इसका कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है मैसेज से या इसके होने से मैसेज में कोई बेहतरी नहीं हो रही, तब भी उसको हटा दें वहाँ से. Another thing that you will look at is the style and readability. When we talk of style, one thing that is very important is the you attitude, how you have worded your sentences, whether you have the you attitude or not. We've talked about the you attitude earlier, which means keeping the reader in mind and keeping in mind their needs. It also means using the pronoun you. और हमने ये पहले भी बात की कि जो you pronoun है वो इस्तेमाल करने से पढ़ने वाले को ये लगता है कि आप उनकी तरफ हैं और आप उनको मद्देनज़र रख रहे हैं, लेकिन ये ख्याल रहे कि you pronoun का इस्तेमाल बहुत ज़्यादा ना हो. स्पेशली अगर मैसेज नेगेटिव है फिर you pronoun ना इस्तेमाल करें, फिर उसको हटा दें. So if you have written a message which has less of the you attitude, then you need to reword it to stress the you attitude. If you feel that you have used too much of the you pronoun and the message is negative, then you need to reword it as well. Also, you will clarify relationships amongst ideas through the placement and combination of phrases. जो भी different ideas में आपस में relationships हैं, आप उनको क्लैरिफाई करेंगे, उनको स्ट्रेंथन करेंगे. और वो स्ट्रेंथन करने का तरीका ये है कि जो आपके आइडियाज़ हैं, जो आपके जिस तरह आपने फ्रेजेस को और आइडियाज़ को प्लेस किया है अपने सेंटेंस के अंदर, उसको आप आगे पीछे कर सकते हैं. कुछ ऐसे हैं कि फ्रेजेस आइडियाज़ आप पहले लिखेंगे स्ट्रेस देने के लिए, कुछ फ्रेजेस आइडियाज़ आप बाद में लिखेंगे उन पे से स्ट्रेस हटाने के लिए. तो इसलिए उनकी आपस में जो रिलेशनशिप है वो इसी प्लेसमेंट से डिटर्मिन होगी. Also, when you are looking at editing your message, you need to look for the in the tone that you use. You need to look for the enthusiasm have you used an enthusiastic enough tone or not? Also, if you feel that the tone is too enthusiastic, then you need to moderate it. अगर आपको लगे कि आपकी टोन में बहुत ही ज़्यादा enthusiasm है तो उसको आपको कम करना होगा. और अगर लफ्ज़ आपने इस तरह के इस्तेमाल किए हुए हैं जो बहुत मुश्किल लग रहे हैं, आपका ये ख्याल है कि शायद पढ़ने वाले को मुश्किल लगें, तो उनको भी आप हटा के उनकी जगह आसान अल्फाज इस्तेमाल करें. So you will eliminate words that seem unfamiliar even to you, and because if they seem unfamiliar to you, then they will definitely seem unfamiliar to your reader. Also, you need to look at the mechanics and format, which means that you will look at the at how you have included the words and the vocabulary. If you have used any abbreviated words, then you will spell them out. Whatever it is that you have, whatever language you have used in your message, you will make sure that it is clear and it is easy for the reader to understand. So abbreviations will be spelled out to avoid any confusion. Now, once you've planned your message, composed it, revised it, then try to leave it for a day or two, and so that you can better evaluate it. Because once, if you are reading something constantly, then a lot of the times you become blind to the mistakes that you have made yourself. बहुत बार ये होता है कि हम एक चीज़ खुद लिखते हैं और उसको हम पढ़ते भी हैं, बार बार पढ़ते हैं, लेकिन उसमें जो एक या दो गलतियां रह जाती हैं वो हमें नज़र नहीं आती. तो इसलिए बेहतर होता है कि उसको एक आध दिन के लिए छोड़ दें, और फिर अगर आपके पास इतना टाइम है कि आप उसको एक आध दिन के लिए छोड़ सकते हैं, तो बेहतर होगा कि आप उसको साइड पे रख दें और फिर एक आध दिन बाद या कुछ घंटों बाद उसको दोबारा देखें. उसमें ये होता है कि कई बार आपको जो मिस्टेक पहले बार बार पढ़ने पे नज़र नहीं आ रही होती, वो आपको ऑब्वियस हो जाती है. So try to review your message for the content, for the organization. You come back to whatever message it is, you come back to it with a fresh perspective if you review it after a gap. Also, if you're looking at it from a fresh perspective, then you can judge whether there's a good balance between the general and the specifics. Also, if you can see if you've provided enough support for your ideas, जो आपने के ideas हैं उनके साथ आपने minor points, evidence लगाई है, वो काफ़ी है या नहीं है. And also you can you will ensure if you've double checked your facts and figures. That is something that's important. If you're using facts and figures, then you need to double check them so that there is no room for error. कोई भी अगर आप figures बता रहे हैं, facts बता रहे हैं, ऐसी चीज़ बता रहे हैं जिसमें गलती का अंदेशा है, तो बेहतर है कि उसको आप चेक कर लें. Coming to style and readability. Style is the way you write and how you come across to the reader. Once you are satisfied with the structure, once you're satisfied with all the content and how it has been structured, then you will review your message for the style and the readability. Style, as I said, one main factor of style is the tone that you use, the you attitude, whether you have the you attitude or not. Readability depends on word choice, sentence length, sentence structure and physical appearance. जो word choice है, आपने क्या अल्फाज इस्तेमाल किए हैं, आपके sentences कितने लंबे हैं या छोटे हैं, sentences का structure कैसा है, मुश्किल है, आसान है, उसकी हमने पहले भी बात की, भी आगे दोबारा बात करेंगे. और physical appearance आपके पेज की और आपके मैसेज की कैसी है. ये सब चीज़ें जो हैं ये रीडेबिलिटी में आती हैं, और रीडेबिलिटी आसान होनी चाहिए, पढ़ने में आपका मैसेज आसान होना चाहिए ताकि रीडर को उससे आसानी हो. जो भी आपने ये सारे जो फैक्टर्स हैं ये इस तरह आप इस्तेमाल करें कि रीडर को कोई दुश्वारी पेश ना आए. टॉकिंग अबाउट वर्ड चॉइस, द two key aspects of word choice are correctness and effectiveness. Whatever language you use, you have to make sure that you are actually putting across the correct message. जो आप कहना चाह रहे हैं, आपके जो अल्फाज आपने चूज़ किए हैं, वो अल्फाज वही मैसेज आगे पहुंचा रहे हैं, या कोई ऐसे अल्फाज आपने यूज़ किए हैं कि उनसे आपका जो मैसेज है वो गलत तौर पे रीडर तक पहुंच रहा है, तो फिर आपको अल्फाज को तब्दील करना होगा. Also effectiveness, which means are the chosen words actually conveying the message in an effective manner or not. जो अल्फाज आपने इस्तेमाल किए हैं वो इतने मुस्बत हैं कि जो आप कहना चाह रहे हैं वो बात इफेक्टिवली पहुंचे। कई बार ये होता है कि बात आपकी करेक्टली तो पहुंच रही है लेकिन उसका इम्पैक्ट पढ़ने वाले पे नहीं हो रहा। तो आपने ऐसे अल्फाज इस्तेमाल करने हैं जो सही भी हों और इफेक्टिव भी हों। और अगर आपको लग रहा है कि शायद ये लफ्ज़ ठीक नहीं है या इसके लिए बेहतर मैं लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल कर सकता हूँ, तो फिर उसको चेक करें, डिक्शनरी में देख लें, उसको रिप्लेस कर लें, कोई उसका सिनोनिम डाल लें या किसी से पूछ लें ताकि आपका जो सेंटेंस है वो और इफेक्टिव हो जाए। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, instead of saying something like the data on our market share is consistent from region to region, you will use the data on our market share are consistent from region to region. The difference is only changing is to are, but it becomes more effective, it becomes more clear, because when you talk about data, you will use are, not is. You have to keep in mind that plain English is very close to spoken English and can be more easily understood. So try to use simple language, plain English in your writing, because that is simplest to spoken English and that is what your reader will find easy to understand. अगर आप कोशिश करेंगे बहुत मुश्किल, बहुत मोटे मोटे अल्फाज डालने के अपने मैसेज में जो आम इस्तेमाल में नहीं आते, जो आम बोलने में नहीं इस्तेमाल होते, तो आपके पढ़ने वाले को भी मुश्किल होगी. You will also make sure that you have the correct balance between functional words and content words. Functional words जब हम कहते हैं तो उसमें included होते हैं conjunctions, prepositions, articles and pronouns. These are functional words. These are words that are expressing relationships amongst content words. Functional words वो हैं जो content words के दरमियान कोई relationship दिखाते हैं और content words वो हैं जो कि आपके जुमले के अंदर एक्चुअल आइडिया एक्सप्रेस करते हैं या ये पता चलता है कि किस चीज के बारे में बात हो रही है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, some objective observers of the biscuit market give Rio the edge in quality, but Gala is lauded for superior distribution. Now, as you see on the screen, in this example, the content words are in italics and the function words are things like of, the, but, for, etc. These are words, if you take them separately, they have no meaning, but when you put them in between content words, they make the sentence complete. So without them, the sentence does not have any links. You just have a lot of nouns and verbs, but there is no connection. Also, content words have both a denotative, a dictionary meaning, and a connotative, which is associative meaning. तो जो कंटेंट वर्ड्स हैं उनका डिक्शनरी वाला मीनिंग भी हो सकता है, जो कि एक आप डिक्शनरी खोलें और उसमें फौरन उसका मतलब मिल जाए, और दूसरा उसका एसोसिएटिव मीनिंग भी हो सकता है जो कि आम डिक्शनरी में ना मिले लेकिन उसको इस्तेमाल में हम ऐसे चीज के लिए भी इस्तेमाल कर सकें उस लफ्ज को जिसका आम मतलब आम इस्तेमाल में वो ना आता हो. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, you may say, I have uncovered some interesting dirt on the police officer, and you may use the same word dirt as my land has fertile and dark dirt. So in this example, in the second example, you are using the denotative meaning of dirt, the dictionary meaning, which is actually that something which is dirty and maybe mud. But in the first sentence, I have just uncovered some interesting dirt on the police officer. The word dirt is not being used in its dictionary sense. It is being used in an associative sense. So the both sentences are using dirt, but with different connotations. The more abstract a word, the more removed from the tangible, objective world of things it is. So try to use words with in their dictionary meaning rather than with their associative meaning. कोशिश ये करें कि जो एक लफ्ज़ का डिनोटेटिव मतलब है, जो डिक्शनरी वाला मतलब है, वो इस्तेमाल किया जाए, ना कि उस लफ्ज़ का फिगरेटिव या एसोसिएटिव. क्योंकि अगर आप एक लफ्ज़ उसके एब्स्ट्रैक्ट मतलब में इस्तेमाल करते हैं तो फिर उसके डिफरेंट मीनिंग्स लिए जा सकते हैं बनिस्बत इसके कि आप एक लफ्ज़ को उसके डिक्शनरी मीनिंग में इस्तेमाल करें तो फिर उसमें कोई कंफ्यूजन की गुंजाइश नहीं रहती. Try to rewrite the sentence that you're going to see without using the words in italics, and then things will become clearer for you. The sentence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, if you try rewriting the sentence without the words in italics, the meaning by changing the words in italics, the meaning can be completely changed. So, try to make sure that the words that you use are those that actually express a very solid meaning rather than being vague. You have to think like a wordsmith. You have to use words that communicate. Wordsmiths are people who are concerned with being clear, concise, and accurate in their use of language. So, when you're editing your message, think like a wordsmith. Try to be clear, concise, and accurate in the message rather than saying something which is so vague that the words substituted by any other words would make sense as well. अगर आप ऐसा मैसेज लिखेंगे कि उन में से कुछ अल्फाज को निकाल के कोई और अल्फाज भी डाल दें तो शायद जुमला जो है वो सही लगे लेकिन पैगाम बिल्कुल चेंज हो जाए, तो वो फिर आपका मैसेज बहुत ही एब्स्ट्रैक्ट है. इसलिए कोशिश करें कि ठोस अल्फाज इस्तेमाल करें जिनका एक्चुअली रिलेशनशिप हो, बहुत क्लियर रिलेशनशिप हो बाकी आइडियाज के साथ जो कि उस मैसेज में इस्तेमाल किए जा रहे हैं. Verbs and nouns are more concrete than adverbs and adjectives. If whatever verbs you're using, the more dynamic and specific it is, the better it is. The more dynamic and specific your sentence becomes. So try to use more verbs, action words, more nouns, naming words in your sentences rather than adverbs and adjectives, because adverbs and adjectives, even if they are taken away, the sentence does not lose much. For example, talking of weak and strong words, weak words or phrases would be something like a wealthy businessman, whereas you could substitute that for a strong word which would be tycoon. Similarly, business prosperity sounds, although it sounds long, but it is weak. A more strong word would be boom. Similarly, hard times can be substituted for stronger word which would be slump. Also, you will communicate best with words that are familiar to your reader, and along with keeping in mind familiarity, keep in mind that words which are familiar to one reader may be unfamiliar to another reader. So you have to, apart from the familiarity, you have to keep your audience in mind as well. Who is it that you're writing for, and will this particular word be familiar to the particular audience that will be reading your communication. For example, if you're using unfamiliar words like ascertain, the more familiar word which would be better to use would be find out, learn. Also, words like consummate are best substituted by more familiar words like close or bring about. Peruse can be substituted by read or study. These familiar words are closer to the audience, they are more easy to understand, and they will obviously make your message more effective and more readable. Also, short words are usually more vivid than long ones, and they improve the readability of a document. If you're using very, very long words, it becomes difficult for the audience to read them, and it becomes difficult for the audience to understand them. जो लंबे अल्फाज होते हैं उनको ज़रा पढ़ के सोचना पड़ता है कि इनका मतलब क्या है, जबकि शॉर्ट अल्फाज जो होंगे, छोटे अल्फाज जो होंगे, उनका मतलब जो है वो फौरन दिमाग में आ जाता है और उनका इमेज भी दिमाग में ज़्यादा देर तक रहता है. दे आर मोर विविड. For example, if you say something like during the precedent year, the company accelerated productive operations, the sentence sounds impressive because it's got a lot of heavy words in it, but the meaning is difficult to grasp. पढ़ के लगता तो है कि हाँ जी इनको बहुत अंग्रेजी बहुत आती है, लेकिन उसका जो मतलब है सेंटेंस में वो शायद समझने के लिए पढ़ने वाले को 2-3 बार इस जुमले को पढ़ना पड़ेगा. इसके बनिस्बत if you write something like last year the company sped up operations, the meaning is clear, the sentence is shorter, and the reader gets the message immediately. The meaning is the same in both the sentences. It's just that this one, in the second sentence, the meaning has been expressed in a more concise and precise manner, whereas in the first sentence the emphasis was more on using long words to impress the reader. Also try to try to use verbs in their original sense, because if you turn verbs into nouns and adjectives, your writing becomes weaker. So don't camouflage your verbs, use them as they are as much as possible. जाहिर है बहुत जगह तो आपको verb को change करना ही होगा, लेकिन कोशिश ये करें कि जो verb है उसको उसके original form में ही इस्तेमाल किया जाए. Watch for endings like ion, tion, ing, etc. जो कि आपकी स्क्रीन पे आपको नजर आ रही हैं. ये जो verbs की endings हैं ये verb की form को change करती हैं और इनसे जो sentence writing है वो ज़रा सी unfamiliar हो जाती है, जो structure है वो मुश्किल हो जाता है. So try to use verbs in their simple form. Let's have a look at some examples. For example, if you say the manager undertook implementation of the rules, here you are camouflaging the verb implement by adding ion to it. It would be better to say the manager implemented the rules. पहले में आपने implementation को noun बना दिया. Here you are using implement as a verb just by using the past tense. Similarly, if you say verification of shipments occurs weekly, here again you are adding you're changing it by adding tion. If you say shipments are verified weekly, the sentence becomes more direct, it becomes simpler to understand. The verb is actually used in verb form, not in noun form. Another aspect that is very important when you are editing your message or when you're revising your message is bias-free language. You have to make sure that your message does not use any biased language. इसकी हमने पहले भी बात की है और ये मैं दोबारा एम्फसाइज इसलिए कर रही हूँ कि इससे आपके मैसेज के टोन पे भी बहुत फ़र्क पड़ता है और जिस तरह वो मैसेज रिसीव हो और परसीव होता है रीडर से उस पर भी बहुत फ़र्क पड़ता है. सो अवॉइड biased language that might offend the audience. Try to avoid any type of cultural bias, gender bias, racial and ethnic bias and disability bias. इन चारों को लेके अगर किसी किस्म का आपको लग रहा है कि इन चारों या पांचों में से कोई आपने लफ्ज़ ऐसे इस्तेमाल किए हैं जिनसे ऑडियंस को तकलीफ हो तो उनको आप अवॉइड करें. अगर कोई कल्चरली या जेंडर के तौर पे या रेशियल एथनिक डिसेबल्ड किसी भी तरह से आपको लगे कि आपके जो अल्फाज हैं वो किसी को दुख पहुंच जाएंगे तो उसको कोशिश करें कि आप ऑल्टरनेटिव अल्फाज इस्तेमाल करें. Let's have a look at some examples of gender bias. For example, if you say mankind, you are using the word only to include men and excluding women. So it might be preferable to say humanity or humankind. Humanity is more commonly used. Similarly, by saying man-made, you are again not including women in that. So it would be better to say artificial or synthetic. Similarly, manpower, it would be better to substitute that by the words like workforce or human energy. अब ये देखिए इन सारे अल्फाज में ये जेंडर बायस है क्योंकि इन सब में ख़वातीन को एक्सक्लूड किया गया है टर्मिनोलॉजी से. For example, if you're talking about children from Sindh who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, it might be better to delete the word Sindhi from your sentence because that would imply that all children from Sindh are disadvantaged. It might be better to say children from lower income families. But this way you are not targeting any particular race, but you're talking about an income group. Similarly, instead of saying something like Ali is an unusually tall Punjabi, it would be better to say Ali is tall because it really doesn't matter whether he's Punjabi or not, or Sindhi or Balochi or Pathan. What you are most interested in telling the audience is that this boy is tall. So you don't really need to include his ethnic background. And also if you're saying unusually tall, then you are implying that Punjabis are generally not tall. So that shows a bias. So it's better to delete such adjectives and verbs or nouns which indicate some kind of disadvantage towards a particular ethnic or racial group. Similarly, a lot of the times when we talk or write, we tend to forget about that we are expressing some kind of a disability bias, and we need to be very careful of that. It would be unacceptable to say something like crippled workers face many barriers in their jobs. It would be, if you want to express the same idea, it would be better to say workers who have physical disabilities face many problems on the job. Substituting the word crippled by people who have physical disabilities sounds much better. It is more preferable, it is more acceptable, because it shows that you are aware of their problem, but you're not talking of it negatively. As you edit your message, you will find yourself rewriting passages, you will find yourself rewriting sentences or even whole sections, because you will find that there are many areas in your message that need to be changed, that need to be redrafted, and if you need to do that, it's perfectly okay. अगर आपको लगे कि आपको दोबारा से कुछ सेक्शंस लिखने हैं जब आप एडिटिंग कर रहे हैं, तो इसमें कोई पैनिक करने की या घबराने की बात नहीं. ये एक बहुत नॉर्मल फिनोमेना है. बहुत बार ये होता है कि हम एक मैसेज पूरा लिख लेते हैं, उस वक्त हमें ठीक लगता है, फिर जब हम उसको दोबारा देखते हैं तो हमें उसमें खासी अपनी गलतियां नजर आती हैं, और यही इसीलिए हम एक मैसेज को रिवाइज करते हैं, एडिट करते हैं, ताकि जो उसकी गलतियां हैं हम उसको इम्प्रूव कर सकें. तो इसमें कोई घबराने की बात नहीं है, कोई डिसहार्टन होने की बात नहीं है अगर आपको रीराइट करने पड़े अपने डिफरेंट सेक्शंस. दैट इज द पॉइंट ऑफ एडिटिंग अ मैसेज. दैट इज व्हाट एडिटिंग इज ऑल अबाउट. If you feel that you need to rewrite sentences, then they would probably be because the sentences are not effective enough. Effective sentences को create करने के लिए you will need to have a look at their structure. You will need to keep in mind that every sentence contains a subject, which would be a noun or a noun equivalent, and a predicate, which is a verb and related word. तो अगर आपको लग रहा है कि आपके sentences में सब्जेक्ट और प्रेडिकेट नहीं है, तो फिर आपको उस सेंटेंस को रिफ्रेज करना होगा कि उसमें सब्जेक्ट भी आए और प्रेडिकेट भी आए. बहुत बार ये होता है कि हम लिख देते हैं एक सेंटेंस और फिर जब हम उसको बाद में पढ़ते हैं तो हमें ये अंदाजा होता है कि इसमें सब्जेक्ट तो कोई पता ही नहीं चल रहा कि ये एक्शन क्या चीज़ परफॉर्म कर रही है, कौन परफॉर्म कर रहा है, या ये है कि जो उनकी रिलेशनशिप है वो इतनी क्लियर नहीं है या एम्फोसिस इतना क्लियर नहीं है. तो देन वी नीड टू रीवर्ड इट और रीराइट इट. देयर आर 3 टाइप्स ऑफ सेंटेंसेस. They are simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. And to give your sentences variety, you will need to use all 3 types. अपने messages में आप कोशिश करें कि तीनों तरह के sentences इस्तेमाल किए जाएं, ताकि आपका एक तो जो मैसेज है वो ज़्यादा इफेक्टिव हो और उसमें कुछ वैरायटी आए, पढ़ने वाला बोर ना हो. वरना अगर आप सिर्फ सिंपल सेंटेंसेस ही अपने मैसेज में लिखेंगे तो वो बहुत बेसिक लगेगा, बहुत ही चाइल्डिश शायद लगे और पढ़ने वाला बोर हो जाए. इसी तरह अगर आप सिर्फ कॉम्प्लेक्स सेंटेंसेस अपने मैसेज में इस्तेमाल करेंगे तो वो कुछ ज़्यादा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड हो जाएंगे और जो आपका मीनिंग है वो बहुत क्लियर नहीं होगा. सो यू विल नीड टू यूज़ अ वैरायटी एंड अ मिक्सचर ऑफ ऑल 3 टाइप्स ऑफ सेंटेंसेस. Maybe use complex and compound sentences to to express ideas, and then use simple sentences to emphasize ideas as well. Let's have a look at the difference between these 3 types of sentences to quickly revise what they are. A simple sentence has a single subject and a single predicate. एक subject होगा, एक predicate होगा, तो एक simple sentence बनेगा. For example, profits have increased in the past year. Profits is a subject, have increased is the predicate. Profits वो हैं जो action कर रहे हैं, have increased, what is happening to the profits is the predicate, the verb, और बाकी जो है in the past year, that's the related idea. A compound sentence expresses 2 or more independent related thoughts. जिस तरह कि हमने एक simple sentence में देखा कि एक independent thought था, compound sentence में 2 independent thoughts होंगे side by side. For example, wage rates have declined by 5%. ये तो एक subject हो गया, एक predicate हो गया. And employee turnover has been high. इसमें एक और subject हो गया, turnover, और एक और predicate हो गया, have been high. So as you see, it's a compound sentence. There are 2 independent ideas. One idea is that rates have declined. The second idea is that turnover has been high. Obviously they are related, but they are, each of them in their own right is a complete idea, a complete thought. आपस में ये related हैं पर dependent नहीं है. अगर आप एक को हटा भी देंगे तो एक section जो है sentence का वो फिर भी उसका मतलब complete होगा. In a complex sentence, there will be one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. एक तो independent clause ही होगा जिस तरह हमने simple sentence में और compound sentences में देखा, और एक या एक से ज़्यादा dependent clauses होंगे. Dependent clauses वो होंगे जो कि जिनको अगर अलग से देखा जाए तो उनका कोई मतलब नहीं, complete मतलब नहीं बनेगा. For example, although you may question Ali's abilities, comma, you must admit that his morals are strong. Now in this, you is the subject, must admit is the predicate. So you must admit that his morals are strong, तो एक independent clause हो गया. लेकिन although you may question Ali's abilities is a dependent clause. इसको अगर हम अलग से पढ़ें तो इसका कोई मतलब नहीं बनता. So it's only when you combine the dependent and the independent that you get a complex sentence. So try to use all three types of sentences. क्योंकि अगर आपके सिर्फ complex sentences होंगे या सिर्फ एक तरह के compound होंगे या simple sentences होंगे तो वो आपका message boring भी लगेगा in terms of its readability और comprehensible भी नहीं होगा, उसको समझना भी मुश्किल शायद हो जाए अगर ज़्यादा confusing है या boring हो जाए. Also, looking at sentence style, try to break the sentence in, if it's long, try to break it into shorter ones to improve readability. If you have used too many passive sentences, try to convert some of them into active voice, because active sentences are stronger than passive sentences. अगर आप एक sentence को, अगर आप सब sentences को passive तरीके से passive voice में लिखेंगे तो उनको समझना मुश्किल हो जाएगा और उनका effect ख़त्म हो जाएगा. तो इसलिए आपको active sentences भी रखने हैं क्योंकि वो ज़्यादा strong होते हैं. Also use passive sentences to soften bad news. अगर कोई आपने बुरी खबर देनी है तो फिर आप passive sentences इस्तेमाल कीजिए, because उससे ये होगा कि आप खुद background में आ जाएंगे and also जो खबर है, बुरी खबर है, वो भी थोड़ी सी background में चली जाती है. And also you can create a more impersonal tone by using passive voice. So you will need to decide when you are revising your message, you will need to make decisions about whether you want to keep a sentence in its particular voice or you want to change it to active or passive as the case may be. For example, the use of passive voice can be seen by this example. If you say sales were increased by 32% last year, this is a sentence in passive voice. It would be an improved way of saying the same thing would be sales improved by 32% last year. Because if when you say sales were increased by 32% last year, तो जो sales की increase है उसका impact कम हो जाता है और कुछ ये impact ज़्यादा हो जाता है कि किसी और ने उनको increase किया. अगर आप उसी बात को active sentence में लिखते हैं sales improved by 32% last year, तो emphasis जो है वो improvement के ऊपर आ जाता है और या increase के ऊपर आ जाता है, तो इसलिए sentence ज़्यादा effective हो जाता है. We talked about redundancies earlier. Eliminate any extra words, unnecessary words and phrases. Be on the lookout for inefficient phrases. कोई ऐसे phrases जो आपको लगे कि अपना मतलब ठीक से नहीं पूरा कर पा रहे हैं या inefficient हैं, जो इनका जिस वजह से इनको include किया गया है sentence या paragraph में, वो अपना मतलब नहीं पूरा कर रहे हैं, तो उनको फिर हटाएं या उनको change करें. Also redundancies, as I said earlier, any extra words which are present in your message, you need to remove those. And unneeded relative pronouns and articles. Words that are not really necessary, they are relative pronouns, they are articles and they are extra. You will need to reduce those so that the content words have more stronger meaning. Let's have a look at the use of articles and how that can improve a sentence. A confusing sentence would be, the project manager told the engineer last week the specifications were changed. A much better, much clearer way of saying the same thing would be, the project manager told the engineer last week that the specifications were changed. So just by including the word that, your sentence becomes much stronger the links between the ideas become much more clearer. You will also, when you are editing your message, need to emphasize key thoughts. Look at your message, read it, see if whatever key thoughts, key ideas you have, see if they are actually being put across in an effective manner, and if you feel that they are not, then you need to emphasize them. You will emphasize parts of a sentence by giving them more space, by putting them at the beginning or end of a sentence, and by making them the subject of the sentence. तो इन तीनों तरह से आप या अपने जो एक सेंटेंस है उसमें जो डिफरेंट पार्ट्स हैं उनको स्पेस ज़्यादा दें, उनको ज़्यादा अल्फाज में एक्सप्रेस करें, या उनकी जहाँ जो सेंटेंस के जुमले के अंदर उनकी जगह है उसको तब्दील करें, उसको आइडिया को शुरू में ले आएँ या बाद में ले आएँ अगर आपको लगे कि शायद वो ज़्यादा एम्फोसिस मिल जाए इस तरह, या उनको सेंटेंस का सब्जेक्ट बना दें. Let's have a look at a sentence in its less emphatic form and more emphatic form, a form which has less emphasis, and then we will see the same sentence with more emphasis. If you say something like, we are cutting the price to stimulate demand, in this sentence there is not much emphasis on what is happening and what the result will be, what it is that you really want to emphasize. Whereas if you say, to stimulate the demand, we are cutting the price, here you have more emphasis on the fact that demand will be stimulated and also the fact that price will be reduced. You, apart from the sentence, you also need to look at your writing on a paragraph level when you are editing it. You will need to develop coherent paragraphs. As we've talked about earlier, paragraphs are functional units that revolve around a single thought. You will try to make sure that every paragraph has one main idea, one single thought, and everything in that paragraph is related to that thought, and everything in that paragraph is actually expressing or expanding that thought. The elements of a paragraph are the topic sentence, which expresses the main idea, what is being talked about in the paragraph, the related sentences which show some relationship between themselves and to the topic, and the transitional elements, ऐसे elements, ऐसी चीज़ें जो कि उन related sentences को आपस में और topic sentence से link कर रही हैं. ये transitional elements conjunctions हो सकते हैं, prepositions हो सकते हैं, etc. But a lot of the times they are conjunctions. There are 5 ways to develop a coherent paragraph. You could develop a paragraph by the pattern of illustration, जिसमें आप कोई चीज़ illustrate कर रहे हैं, कोई चीज़ expand कर रहे हैं. You could develop it by comparison and contrast, जिसमें आप दो चीज़ों या दो से ज़्यादा चीज़ों को आपस में compare कर रहे हैं या contrast कर रहे हैं. Or cause and effect, where you're showing that one thing caused another or one thing was caused by another. Or classification, where you are grouping ideas together and actually talking about them. And problems and solutions, where you are talking about a problem and giving the solution for that problem, how it can be solved. So these are the 5 different ways in which paragraphs can be developed, and if you keep broadly these patterns in mind, then it will be very easy for you to revise your paragraphs and to make sure that if there's anything within the paragraph which does not conform to the particular pattern that you have in mind, then that idea should be dealt with maybe in another paragraph. When you actually produce your document, you have to make a lot of decisions about the design of the document. पहले तो हमने बात की एक डॉक्यूमेंट की कंटेंट की और उसमें जो आइडियाज़ किस तरह ऑर्गेनाइज किए गए हों और जो आपने चीज़ें कहनी है या जो इस्तेमाल उसमें आइडियाज़ या लैंग्वेज इस्तेमाल करनी है उसको किस तरह आपने स्ट्रक्चर करना है. अब हम बात करते हैं उसकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की इन टर्म्स ऑफ विजुअल्स, कि वो देखने में किस तरह की लगेगी और उससे आपके पढ़ने वाले पे क्या इम्पैक्ट आएगा. Design elements include white space, how much of the text is free of art and artwork, how much of the page is covered by print. It also includes design elements also include margins and line justifications. How much space have you left on each side of the page, the left and the right? Is your page left justified or not? Left justified and rugged right side gives the document an open feeling. अगर आपका document जो है वो left justified है, जिसका मतलब कि आपकी सारी जो left side से margin के साथ से शुरू हो रहा है, लेकिन right side से कोई lines छोटी हैं, कोई बड़ी हैं, तो उससे आपका जो document है उसकी ज़रा खुला effect आता है बनिस्बत इसके कि अगर आप अपने document को जस्टिफाई कर लें कि राइट साइड से भी सारी लाइंस बंद हैं, एक ही जगह पे बंद हो रही हैं सेंटेंस के एंड में, तो उससे आपका जो डॉक्यूमेंट है उससे ज़रा क्लोज्ड लुक आती है. लेट्स हैव अ लुक एट an ineffective page design and an effective page design. As you see on the first slide, there is very little white space, there is very little space between paragraphs. Although it is left justified and the right side is rugged, the lines are so close together that visually there is no impact, whereas the same text is given on the page next to it, and here as you see the page is drafted in such a way that there is more white space, there are more spaces between different paragraphs or between sections of a paragraph of the message, and the message is actually divided into sections with headings and numbers, and this gives the message a more effective look and a more impressive look as well. Other design elements are headings and captions. Headings help the reader quickly identify the content, they help the reader locate specific information. हमने पिछले एग्जाम्पल में भी देखा कि हेडिंग्स देने से पेज की भी इफेक्टिवनेस बढ़ गई और आपको एक साथ हेडिंग पढ़ के ही अंदाजा हो गया कि ये टॉपिक क्या है और किस चीज़ की बात होगी इस पैराग्राफ में. Also the typeface, the physical design of the letters, what the letters look like is important, and the type styles are also important. Avoid using type styles that slow your readers down. बहुत से अब तो कंप्यूटर के ऊपर बहुत से टाइप स्टाइल्स हैं, बहुत सी राइटिंग स्टाइल्स हैं जो पढ़ने में आसान हैं और बहुत से ऐसे हैं जो मुश्किल हैं. तो जो भी टाइप फेस हो और जो टाइप स्टाइल हो वो ऐसा आप इस्तेमाल करें कि रीडर को पढ़ने में आसानी हो. लेट्स हैव अ लुक एट सम एग्जांपल्स. The serif typeface is what you see in the first box on the left. Here if you see times we have Times Roman. This is often used for text. So if you're writing a long text, then Times Roman is the most common form of typeface used. Also Times Roman is harder to read if it's all capital, so try to avoid capital letters in Times Roman. Helvetica on the other hand is often used for headings, and if you use it in capitals then Helvetica is a cleaner face to use than Time Romans. So in your text you will try to use Time Romans, and in your headings, especially if they are in capital form, then you will use a Helvetica. As far as your design decisions are concerned, for effective design, try to pay attention to consistency, that the same type of design should be used across all pages of the message and in all sections of the message. Use the same type of headings, give the same amount of spacing between paragraphs. ये ना हो कि आपने के पहले सेक्शन में तो पैराग्राफ्स के अंदर एक लाइन की स्पेसिंग है और अगले सेक्शन में पैराग्राफ्स के दरमियान स्पेसिंग है ही नहीं, या आपने एक टाइप फेस इस्तेमाल किया है एक पैराग्राफ के लिए और दूसरे पैराग्राफ के लिए दूसरा टाइप फेस. ये सब चीज़ें नहीं होनी चाहिए. आपका जो भी मैसेज है, जो भी उसका डिज़ाइन है, वो कंसिस्टेंट होना चाहिए. ऑल्सो दे शुड बी बैलेंस बिटवीन व्हाट यू आर यूजिंग. यू can't have too many headings and not enough text. Look at the page and see how it looks visually. That is important. Restraint, detail. What it is that you're using, where are the different elements placed, and what is the exact detailing of the visuals of your page. Those are important in the kind of impact that will be made on your audience. You will also at the end, once you've done all this, once you've edited for content, the organization, you've looked at the design, then finally you will proofread your message, because that is what really makes your message credible. If you at the end have mistakes in your message, then or errors, spelling errors, simple grammatical errors, and that seems very sloppy. So credibility is affected by your attention to detail and format. यूज ग्रामर एंड स्पेल चेक्स वाइजली. अब तो बहुत आसानी है, ज़्यादातर काम जो है वो कंप्यूटर पे होता है, उसमें ग्रामर चेक्स भी होते हैं, स्पेल चेक्स भी होते हैं. सो ऑलवेज, नो मैटर what you do, no matter how much of a rush you are in, use a spell check and a grammar check. So today we learned to edit messages for content and organizational style and readability. We learned to choose the most correct word and most effective words to make your point. We also looked at how to rewrite sentences to clarify the relationship amongst ideas and to make your writing interesting. We learned how to identify the different elements of the paragraph. एक paragraph के क्या-क्या different elements होते हैं, उनका क्या मकसद होता है. We also looked at the different designs for written documents, how to rewrite paragraphs using appropriate development techniques, and that it's important to proofread your message for mechanics and format. And with this, we come to the end of today's lecture. If you have any questions, please feel free to email. The address is english@vu.edu.pk. Until next time, Allah Hafiz.